I would like to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Craig Considine, who teaches sociology at Rice University. He comes from a Catholic background. Despite his young age, he has published prolifically. He is not the type of scholar who hides away in the ivory tower. He is an academic and an activist. He has been at the forefront of interfaith work between Christians and Muslims, trying to build bridges when so many other people are trying to burn them down to the ground. So, with no further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Craig Considine.
Peace be with you all. It is a pleasure and honor to be here. John, thank you very much for that introduction. Humbled. It's a pleasure to be here, as I said, coming from Houston originally. That is almost 100% white and 100% Christian. And when I went to college, I wanted to understand why 9/11 happened. So kind of had a mentality which was not very positive in terms of my outlook on Islam. When I went to college, I wanted to be a CIA agent, if you could believe that. I was taking Arabic, and I enrolled in a course called The World of Islam. And I was really lucky and blessed to have a professor. His name is Akbar Ahmed. And the first thing that he told us was the following: the ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr. And this is a saying attributed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be with him. The ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr. So from there, I kind of went with this pursuit of knowledge. Now, that quote links us to the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of his time, which, if you are not familiar, was just cited by the Pakistani Supreme Court in their ruling on Asia Bibi. So for those who are not familiar with Asia, she is a Christian, a young Christian woman who was accused of blaspheming against Prophet Muhammad. And remarkably, literally, you can Google the Supreme Court ruling. Imam, you were saying that it was extensively dealt with in the ruling, the document, 21 pages, and they also mentioned John's book. So literally, scholarship is saving lives, which is pretty remarkable. And that is a teaching of Muhammad. Seek knowledge. So that's a little context here. Like, what I'm going to talk about is a perspective that I actually had in 2008. And I want to share with you a story of Christians defending Muslims. Now, we know in the covenants, Muslims are commanded by Muhammad to protect Christians. But when I first came across the covenants, as a Christian, I looked at it and said, these documents are not simply for Muslims, they are for humanity. And I thought that they provided a lot of promise and a lot of hope in terms of toning down the temperature, this kind of hostile environment that we see between Christians and Muslims. So I wrote about it. I see the covenants through the lens of a sociological concept, which we refer to as religious pluralism. Religious pluralism is the energetic engagement with religious diversity. It must be separated from tolerance. When we hear the word tolerance, right? If you tolerate a friend, or if you have a child, you tolerate a child. It's not enough for our diverse world today. As John had read in the covenant, Muhammad is not simply saying tolerate your Christian neighbors. You need to embrace them. You need to commit together in certain projects. You need to understand the neighbor as well. And more than anything, you need to engage in a way that promotes the betterment of humanity. So the story that I want to share with you happened in 2008. And at the time, I was with Professor Ahmed, who I mentioned earlier. We were traveling around the United States, and we were studying American identity through the lens of Muslims. So this is 10 years ago, but the Islamophobia was still pretty rampant. And we were in Nashville, Tennessee, and we were at a masjid. I forget the name of the masjid, but we met an imam, and the imam said that he had a story to tell us, and he said, okay, come to our center in Columbia, Tennessee the next morning. So we really didn't know what he was going to say, and when we got to the mosque, we sat down and he shared with us the following story. So I think the story is both heartbreaking but also uplifting. It's relatively devastating. So here it goes. His name is Dawood Abu Diab. He is the director of the Islamic Center of Columbia, Tennessee. Dawood was woken, he was on February 9th, 2008, he was awakened at 5 o'clock in the morning, and on the other line was the chief of the fire department of Columbia, and the chief of the fire department said, Dawood, your mosque is on fire. So Dawood goes over, if you can imagine a massive mosque literally in flames at 6 a.m. in the morning. The community is a very, very small Muslim community. It's about 50 people that actually attend this mosque. When the flames engulfed, the entire mosque went down. So as the days moved forward, the FBI got involved, and long story short, they found that this was a hate crime, and it was perpetrated by members of what is called the Christian Identity Movement, which is a combination of far-right Christian beliefs in combination with white supremacy. So before they torched the mosque, they went inside, they trashed the interior, they tossed Molotov cocktails in the prayer space, they put swastikas on the building, and they also wrote, "White Power, we run the world." And remember, this is back in 2008, before we witnessed the rise of President Trump. So you may be wondering, what do Christians have to do with this story? So the day after the mosque went into flames, a reverend named Bill Williamson of Columbia, Tennessee, he is the leader of the First Presbyterian Church. He reached out to Dawood, and Bill immediately sprang into action. The first thing he did was he started a fundraiser to collect some money to help the community rebuild the mosque, which is obviously extremely important, but Reverend Bill did something, I think, which is even more powerful. He gave Dawood the keys to his church, and he told Dawood, anytime you need a space, anytime you need an area to engage in worship, our church is open to you. I think it's a beautiful, powerful tale, and it's also one that we find in other parts of the world. This idea of Christians coming to the defense of Muslims. When I was preparing for this talk, I came across a bunch of stories of Christians actually engaging in that process of religious pluralism. During the Arab Spring in Cairo, there was a beautiful story of a group of Christians, Coptic Christians, actually forming a human chain around Muslims that were outside praying. So we have all of these different examples. And in light of the covenants, it's really what we're seeing is just a flip. So Muhammad was commanding Muslims to protect Christians. Humanity, at least as a Christian, my understanding of Jesus' legacy also requires me to do the same. So the last thing I want to leave y'all with, this concept of religious pluralism that I had mentioned. We see it running throughout all the covenants. And if you can walk away with an acronym, you can walk away with something I call DEUCE. So DEUCE. And what it stands for is dialogue, education, understanding, commitment, and engagement. Religious pluralism is not simply a sociological concept. It's a mindset. It's a way of life. We need to start talking with one another, simple dialogue. When we engage in this process, we can actually educate one another. When you educate one another, you can actually start understanding why things are the way they are. When you have that level of security between two people, that level of comfortability, you can actually start committing yourselves and different groups to shared projects. Once you have that, you engage together, hand in hand. And Muhammad, as a Christian, I don't simply see Muhammad as a Muslim. He came for humanity, just as Jesus did and just as the prophets did before. So the covenants, as our future speakers here will engage with, crucial documents for our time. And they're for humanity, not simply for Muslims.